Hello, my name is David. I'm here with
Courtney.
And this is episode 3 of the Post-Race Podcast. So today we have something I've been super excited about trying to do and very excited that I actually did it. So it is the Mountain Lakes 100-mile race out in Olalley Lake Resort, Oregon. And this was a true doozy. So I'm really excited to talk about it. And if you don't know, this podcast is pretty much a verbal race report of something that we did. This particular race, I ran it. Courtney was not only the crew chief, but she also paced me for the last 30 miles. So we plan on pretty much diving into the whole thing. So gear, the race itself, training, and post-race. So that's pretty much the summary. Let's jump right in.
All right.
So, for the race itself, if you couldn't tell by the name, it's 100 miles. It's got about 11,000 feet of climbing throughout the thing, so really it's a fairly flat course in terms of mountain, quote-unquote, courses. The website itself promotes it as like one of the most beautiful 100-mile races in the U.S. It takes place in late September, which for the Pacific Northwest can lead to some weather issues, which we will get into. But it also is a very beautiful time of year, so there's a mix there. The course itself is kind of like you run a small loop and then a big lollipop, pretty much. That's 30 miles, 15-mile loop, and then 30 miles back on the way you came. And that 30 miles is all in the PCT pretty much, I believe. So very beautiful. It's like central on the east side of the mountains, Oregon, kind of sandwiched in between Mount Hood and Mount Jefferson. So the area is gorgeous when weather permits. So I guess we can talk about preparation and training a bit here. So I signed up for this race right when the registration opened, which I don't remember when exactly that was, but that gave me the better part of a year to train for this and get ready for it. So that's what I focused on the whole year. I pretty much planned my race calendar around this event. So I picked a bunch of like 50Ks and marathons and half marathons, and I just kind of structured it out. So I was doing kind of one ultra a month leading up to it. And then about a month out, I did the Squamish 50-50 as kind of like my last big checkup run, which if you watched the previous episode of this podcast, you know it did not go as planned. So that kind of threw a wrench into things. And then literally 2 days after that race, which I DNF'd, I went on a training run out to Mount St. Helens with Courtney, and I just kind of jammed my foot on this root and hurt my ankle, and then kept running on it. And then I ended up like hurting my other ankle by compensating for that throughout that run. And then, so that one incident left me pretty much unable to run for the entire time leading up to the race, which, you could think of as a long taper, which is what I tried to tell myself. But when you can't run for almost 4 weeks, it definitely affects your confidence. I think, I had told you guys, Courtney and my crew before the race, the week before the race, I was like, I can't really see myself finishing this at this point. Like, I haven't ran over 50 miles in over a year, and this just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. I was like, maybe 10% chance, if everything goes right, like the stars are going to have to align for me to actually get this thing done, because it just doesn't feel possible right now. And, the week of the race came, and I actually did get some decent miles in. Like, I ran for the first time pain-free, I think 3 days before the race or 4 days before the race. I actually went out to Capitol Forest and did one of my favorite loops out there, and my ankles didn't hurt at all. I actually ran almost the whole thing, which I usually don't run the uphills in that little loop that I do, but I just powered through them. So I was feeling pretty good, and I did have a little bit of confidence boost there going into it. So that last training run really, really helped me out, I think. At least mentally, I'm sure it didn't do much physically, but it made me feel like, okay, maybe this is possible. And so, before getting injured, I actually felt really good. I felt like I was doing the work to be able to, oh God, excuse me, to be able to put in a sub 24 effort with relative ease. Like I thought that was going to be a pretty attainable goal. And to be honest, at the time, I probably was feeling like anything over that was going to be a little bit of a failure on my part. So to kind of alter your expectations and your goals so rapidly within the course of a couple of weeks, which, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have ever planned for that for my first 100, thinking like, oh, I'll just crush this under 24 hours, no problem. But, that clearly wasn't the case. So overall, I felt really good leading up to the race until I got injured. And after that, I kind of felt a little shaky, was a little uncertain. I would think day of the race, I was probably, 30, 40% chance thinking I would finish. Because again, I just didn't know how long my ankles would hold up. The wheels could fall off at any time, really. So it was just kind of like, I'm going to go until I can't anymore. And so that was the plan. We drove down to Detroit Lake, which is about an hour outside of the start/finish out at Lolly Lake Resort, which who knew Oregon had their own Detroit? And it is a lot nicer than the one in Michigan. So
it was a really pretty day that day too.
Yeah, so we drove down Thursday, which was pretty nice, and Friday actually was very nice as well. Yeah. However, the weather report was saying that there was going to be showers throughout the whole day, and it was like low 40s, mid 40s, and like upper 30s for the night.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those 2 days while we were down in Detroit were a lot of stressing about how,
the weather for the race.
How bad it was going to get. So, which I definitely was concerned about, considering, first 100-miler and didn't want to be soaking wet the whole time. But so Friday afternoon, we actually went back towards Salem to get food, and we actually got dinner that we brought back to the little cabin we stayed in. So we stayed in this really nice little cabin. Well, it wasn't really a cabin, but
it was nice. Yeah,
it was a pretty cool cabin style hotel room in the Detroit Lake Lodge. So if you're in the area and, if you're trying to do this race and you want some comfort, it's a good place to stay. We'd recommend it. They were very nice to us. So we drove down to the Packet pickup after that, and it was very, very pretty.
Yeah, the Packet pickup was great.
Yeah, the weather
was perfect.
Weather was perfect. The road getting there there's like, I don't actually know the mileage because it took like well over a half an hour, but it was probably only like 10 or 15 miles on this road. But the road to get to the lake resort is
awful.
Bad. Yeah. I mean, I have an F-150, and there were some spots where I was worried I was going to be hitting. So I can't imagine having a low clearance vehicle trying to get through that. But some people did. So kudos to them. But that was a little bit of a worry because I was like, uh-oh. Mostly just thinking about Saturday morning, the day of the race. I was like, man, getting here, that early in the morning when there's going to be traffic pretty much.
Yeah.
And there's going to be the parking was obvious it was going to be an issue. There was just really nowhere.
None.
Yeah. So those were two things that were kind of on my mind the night before and were stressing me out a little bit. So we grabbed our stuff, got a free pair of shoes, which
the shoes.
I didn't remember that you got that when I had signed up for it. So that was kind of cool. And got this shirt and
my shirt.
And then we were off back to the lodge. We met up with the rest of the crew, Jimmy, Rodeo, and Ben. And we had a nice little night.
Yeah.
Hanging out, having a good time. And
then it was race day.
And then the race came. Yeah, it was quick. I slept pretty poorly. I slept about as well as you can expect.
We also all slept in the same room. So it was all 5 of us in the same room.
Probably got like 6-ish, maybe 5 hours of sleep. But a lot of stressing, a lot of tossing and turning, and a lot of dreams about waking up past the race start and stuff. So eventually my alarm went off. I think I had mine set for like 5:45 a.m. and the race started at 8 a.m. So it gave us a lot of time, but we still had that hour-ish drive plus parking and everything. So I wanted to be out of there by 6:30, and we were. So we got packed up pretty quick. So all 5 of us crammed into my F-150, which normally is fine, but when it's filled with a bunch of trash, like junk food, and I actually packed up a ton of clothes because I knew the weather was going to be iffy, and I just didn't really know what I would need, this being my first 100-miler. So I actually packed up a bunch of my clothes in these little plastic tubs. Oh, God. Excuse me. And they're like 12 inches by 5 inches by 5 inches or something like that. So there's these small little tubs, and I just had one labeled, for all my cold weather stuff, one for my hands, feet, and head, one for my shirts, one for my shoes, things like that. Yeah, and electronics, a medical bin. So I had all these things kind of organized pretty well, so that when I did come into these aid stations, my crew could just kind of quickly grab what I needed out of them, and I could just say, it's in the medical bin or whatever, which worked out really well.
Yeah,
so
that did work out well.
That's something I might recommend to somebody trying this for the first time. So we had to, but packing all that was a bit of a struggle. So getting that all in the truck, and of course it's pouring down rain in the morning, and so we had some stuff that really shouldn't get wet. So we had to cram some of that inside the cab. But eventually we did get it, and we did get our 6:30 cutoff just in time. So we were out of there, and the rain didn't let up. It just rained the whole way there, and the road was just as bad as I remembered. And we got there, and the parking... The parking
was awful.
Yeah, it was worse than we were expecting, really. So I think we got there,
We got there with like an hour to spare, and we ended up having to drop you off because we couldn't find a spot to park.
Yeah, we left well before 6:30, and so we got there probably, I think, close to 7:15 or something like that. And I was driving, trying to find parking until about 7:40, and I was like, all right, I have to just go check in, because the check-in was until 7:45, I believe, and the race started at 8. So I just literally stopped, jumped out of my truck, had rodeo drive, and I was like, all right, guys, if I don't see you, I'll see you back at this spot in a couple hours. Well, like 5 or 6 hours. And luckily they found a spot just a couple minutes later, and we met back in the middle, because I actually forgot a couple things out of the truck that I needed, mostly the waterproof plug for my phone. So it all worked out, basically. And so I had all my rain stuff on. I felt, as good as I was going to feel. So I stood at the place they corral you at for the start line. It's pretty cool because it's in between the lake and the start, and it's like, 30 feet. So everyone's jammed back in between the start line and the lake in this cool little area. And then, they do their race brief, and the gun goes off. I think it was a little early. I think it was like actually 7:58 or something like that.
It was early, yeah. I think it was actually 5 minutes early.
Yeah, it could have been 7:55.
My watch, and I was like, oh, they're starting early.
But I was like, good. I need all the time I can get, so I hope they let me have an extra 5 minutes. So that was it, and we were off. And the first section of the race, like I mentioned, it's just a loop out and around. I think there's a little bit on the PCT, but it's largely on Forest Service roads or logging roads. And it's the parts that aren't on that are like exposed ridge lines and some technical, like really rocky and rooty sections. And it also has the most amount of climbing throughout the whole race in that section, which I do have here. It is, so this loop is 26 miles with 3,800 feet of gain and 3,800 feet of loss, obviously. And it was touted as the most difficult part of the race. So everyone was saying, take it easy the first marathon pretty much, because it's the hardest part of the race in terms of like technicality and like gain and stuff. And I listened. I took it pretty easy. There's especially this part, I think it's from like mile 4 or 5 down to like 8 or 9, where it's all downhill. It's a logging road, or it's a Forest Service road that's just straight downhill for like 4 or 5 miles. And it would be really easy to just bomb it, which is what I normally would do. Because if there's one strength I have, it's bombing hills. But not in a long race. So I didn't want to blow up my quads. And so I took it easy. I actually ran with a woman named Tammy from Maine for the whole downhill. And we just kept a nice, comfortable pace. I think we were like, around 9 minutes per mile throughout that whole downhill, which normally I'd probably be trying to push like 6 or 7 something per mile. So I'm really glad I didn't, because that would have just ruined my whole race. So thanks, Tammy, for keeping me in check. And so, yeah, we talked for a bit, and it was just enjoyable miles. And the rain actually let up for that little section there. And so I was feeling great. I think, at around 10 or so miles in, I was on top of the world, thinking like, okay, this is possible. Okay, I could probably do this. And then a couple miles later, the first place where you can actually see your crew, which is where Tammy and I took our separate ways because she was waiting for her husband there. But I had told my crew, don't bother going there. It's just going to be a hassle for you guys. Just wait at Olali Lake, which is the end of that loop. So they wouldn't have to move. They could just stay at the start/finish and then meet me back, 26 miles later. And so, I saw everyone with their crew and everything like that. And I took a little bit of time at that aid station to get some Coke, but it was very crowded because there were a bunch of crew there. And it was probably the smallest area that you could see crew. So I wish I would have not stopped there at all and just kept going. Because right after that, as I was leaving that aid station, I started to feel my ankle hurt. And I was like, uh-oh, this is not good. And so I was like, well, hopefully it's not just totally killing me by the time I get back to my friends. And luckily enough, it kind of numbed out. So over the next few miles, it just the pain just got duller and duller until I just didn't really notice it anymore. So, I mean, it could have been there the whole day for all I know, but it didn't matter. So I just kept going, and I started to feel a bit normal again. And then I ran into some more people that I ran with for probably like 4 or 5 miles until we hit the bees. So
more bees.
Yeah. This time I think it was yellow jackets. Which really the sting, so it was kind of funny in some way, because you hear, these grown adults screaming their heads off, just a few hundred feet or a few hundred yards in front of you. And there's like, bees, bees, bees. And you're like, oh man, that's, and they're just like screaming. So it's kind of funny, but then you realize like, oh shit, I have to run through those bees. And you're like, oh no. And my time came, and I was actually I was running with some people, and I had my full rain gear on, even though I think it had just stopped raining at the time. But I zipped up everything, so I was like fully covered except like a little space on my face, and like everything else was covered except my legs. Like my knees weren't, because I was wearing knee-high socks at the time and shorts. But I had a guy go in front of me. I was like, all right, man, you go for it. And I think he got stung like 7 or 8 times. And I felt really bad for that, but it worked because I only got stung once. So I ran, maybe 10 feet behind him, and I just sprinted. Like, it's the fastest I ran during the whole race, I'm sure. And so I just sprinted, and I had one bee sting me like on my quad, on my leg, which I barely noticed it. Like, I looked down and I saw it on there, and I flicked it off, and I was like, not sure if it stung me for a while. And then like within a quarter mile, it started to throb a little bit, and I was like, okay, it got me. But I made it out of there way better than most people, it seemed like. I swear. And then at the next aid station, it was carnage. There was like tons of people that were just like, oh, I got stung 10 times. And I'm like, oh, shit. Sucks for you. And I did feel bad. But I was also happy that I didn't get stung a bunch because I've been stung a bunch at the beginning of a race before, and it just saps your energy. So I'm really glad I didn't get stung all that often, just once. And there was people that got stung multiple times throughout the day. Like the same guy I was running with actually who got stung a bunch, he then got stung another like at least once a mile or so down later.
Oh, man.
And I think that's when I left him. Because I was like, okay, this guy's a bee magnet. I got to get out of here. So I kind of took off. But I hopefully that didn't cause anyone to drop. I don't know. I saw some pictures on Facebook, and there was definitely some bad looking bee stings. So, and that was, like I said, I think that was about mile 18.5. So the next bit was pretty uneventful. It was mostly just getting back to Olali Lake, where I think that section, it rained super hard on me. But right as I came up to the aid station where I would meet you guys, it had stopped raining. So when I actually met up with you guys for the first time, there was no rain. It was good. Basically, yeah. I was super stoked. So I ran in and I was just like scanning, looking for you guys. And then I see all you guys, and you had this great little spot up under a tree. And pretty much you guys knew what I wanted. I mean, I came in and I was like, I want to change my clothes completely, like everything. And I did, except for my shoes and socks. I left those, but I changed shorts, underwear, my vest even, and
your hat?
Hat, everything. Buff? Yeah. And Courtney just took Courtney handled the vest. She just took everything out of what I had and put it in the new one, which was the same exact vest, just a different color. So that worked out really well.
And we had a pop-up tent that he just changed in, so he didn't have to go to the bathroom or anything.
Yeah, it was great. Or I guess I would have definitely not done that. I would have exposed myself to the world before doing that. But it was nice because, yeah, we bought this little pop-up tent off Amazon for like $20, and it just goes up under its own weight. And you can just hop inside and then change. Nobody has to see your gross body. And so that worked out awesome. I used it a couple times that day. And so another thing I might recommend to people. And so I didn't really spend too much time there. I had a Mountain Dew.
A couple sips of Sprite.
Yeah, I had some Sprite. And then you and Rodeo got my soft flasks refilled with Tailwind. So I had my system for nutrition, which I should have probably mentioned earlier, but my plan going in was to heavily rely on Tailwind, which was something that I normally don't do because I normally take a bladder, which is like 1.5 liters, and I'll just put a bunch of scoops of Tailwind in it. And by the time the race is like half over, I feel like shit. I haven't drank enough of the Tailwind. And so this time I tried something a little bit different. I had the Solomon soft flasks, which are like 500 milliliters or something like that. Whatever that is in ounces, 15 ounces or something maybe.
I think so.
And I just put 2 scoops of Tailwind in them, and that's it. No water or anything. I just put 2 scoops of Tailwind in 2 of the soft flasks. And then I had one that actually had water and Tailwind mix in it. And so when I would get to the aid stations, I would just have them put water in those soft flasks. So it was like, I'm just getting my recharge on Tailwind. And it worked out great. So I went through 3 of those in the first 26 miles, which...
600 calories?
Yeah, it was 600 calories in about 5.5 hours is what it took me to do that, which was great. That put me right where I wanted to be because I was also supplementing with aid station food. And I had... some Spring Energy, which I only ate one of the whole day, I think, but it's nice to have them. And I had these fruit leather type things that were also pretty good that I had a couple of. So nutrition, surprisingly enough for me, went really well throughout the whole day with that plan in mind. And so, yeah, Courtney and Rodeo refilled that stuff. I was stocked and ready to go probably within like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was out of there. I didn't want to linger too much there. I told those guys, I was like, I'm going to take a lot of time at mile 55 at Clackamas, and we can hang out a bit and talk. But I wanted to bank some time because the reality is too, for my pacers, like Jimmy and Courtney.
We're slow.
Yeah, they're pretty slow. I mean, Jimmy's really not a runner. He's just a hiker, but he can hike fast. So, and he can run a little bit when he needs to. So I knew that with both of them, like the max speed was probably 15 minutes per mile, and the average speed was probably going to be closer to like 18 to 20 minutes per mile.
Especially if there's incline.
Yeah. And so with the cutoff, I mean, your average pace has to be 18 minutes per mile for the cutoff for 30 hours. And so I wanted to basically bank some time. Now, when I came into you guys, I was at under 13 minutes a mile. So I think I was at like 12:50 something. So things were looking good. And my plan moving forward on this next section was to just maintain that or do better. And so without killing myself, I wanted to stay efficient because, it's a long day and I'd never pushed myself past, 100K. So I didn't know really what to expect, but I wanted to have that time banked because 30 hours can come pretty quick when you're walking at 2 miles an hour at the end of a race. So I was off, and this next section was probably close to the easiest. I can pull up the stats here, but it's actually net downhill.
29 miles for that section.
Yeah, it's 29 miles with only 2,500 feet of climbing and 4,000 feet of loss. So, like I said, it's net downhill. And you can definitely make up some time, which I did. I think the majority of the time that I was moving, I was probably at like 11 minutes per mile or something like that. And then I did take a couple of stops at the aid stations, especially towards the end of this run. But overall, this was probably the hardest section for me, just because it was pretty long. Yeah, mentally, because it was pretty long. And there's also some big stretches without aid. You have 2 7+ mile sections with no aid. So yeah, there's this one, I think it's Pinhead's aid station, where it's 7 miles out, and then the next one is 7 miles. So you have this back-to-back kind of 7 mile thing, which normally a lot of the races that we do, 7 miles in between aid stations is nothing. So it's like whatever, but it felt like a long time on this race. So I just kind of was moving. I mean, just trying to cruise, and I got inside my own head a couple of times. I think probably like in the upper 30s, it started to rain a bit, and I was just getting tired and kind of out of it, and I was just like, man, I'm not even halfway. And it's like, I don't know how long I can keep this up. But luckily, I was listening to a really good book, and so that was nice. And I also ran into a very nice lady named Marla, and I ran a couple miles with her, and she also kind of got me out of that funk. She's from Tennessee, if I recall. And so, yeah, the couple miles with her really helped me out. And the book helped. And the weather, it actually was good for a while. And then, it did start to rain towards the end of that section. And the darkness also came during that section. So, which is when I started to get cold again. So I was a little lazy too, and I didn't put my rain jacket on right away. So I think at like mile 40 something, mid 40s, which is also where I had a crepe. I think. I don't remember where the crepe was exactly, but it was somewhere in between mile 35 and 50. So at one of those aid stations, somebody was serving crepes, and it was awesome. I mean, that was really nice. And it was also at the time where I was really over drinking Tailwind. I was like, oh, I'm sick of it, but I was like forcing myself to drink it because I knew I needed to. And I took a couple of salt tabs throughout that time too at the aid stations. But that was the first real food I think I had, was that crepe. which, you just don't know how you're going to react to real food during one of these runs. And that's one of the secrets to finishing hundreds is like, I guess it's not a secret, but that's one of the things you have to do is eat. Like if you're not eating, you're not going to finish. And you have to eat a lot. So I knew I had to eat, and I took any chance I could. If it looked like I could eat it, I would try to eat it. And the crepe was one of those things where I was like, oh, hell yeah, dude, I'll eat that. And it was a decent size, and I just took it to go from that aid station, and I just kind of walked and ate it for a while, and it ended up being great. And then I think it started to rain, and that's when I didn't put my rain jacket on for a while. And so everything I was wearing was soaked until I eventually did get my rain jacket out, which was actually after, so it had been dark. I got to the aid station at mile 50, actually, this is where it got a little scary for me because I was in there, and they actually were serving something I had never heard of before, pierogi. Yeah, pierogi, which is pretty much just a ravioli, except it's filled with potato. And it was really good. I mean, it was just like a salty, potato-y noodle thing that was easy to eat, and it was warm. And so I ran into this aid station at mile 50, and I ate, I think, 2 of those, and I drank a bunch of Coke. And I was just kind of sitting there for a second, thinking like, okay, cool. I'm only 5 miles away from my friends. And if I can make it to you guys at 55 at the time that I'm going, because I was like, well under 12 hours, which was great. Like if I was, I had already completed 50 miles. I was like halfway through in like 11 hours and 20 minutes or something like that. And I was like, great. I'm well on the pace I want to be. And so I was happy sitting there and just drinking and chatting with those guys and eating my pierogi. And then I leave that aid station, and they had already turned on the propane heaters inside their aid station. And so when I went outside and it was just raining and it was so cold, it was like 40 degrees colder outside. That's when I put on my rain jacket, because I walked out and I almost immediately started shivering. And I was just like, oh no, that's not good. Don't want to be shivering. And so I put my rain jacket on and I started to run, and I kept shivering for like almost a mile. I was like worried that, hypothermia was on the way or something, that I was just going to have to drop at 55. So I pushed it kind of hard, and I was using my headlamp at that time. And if I remember right, it's mostly downhill from that aid station to the 55. And I remember bombing some of it and just being like, oh man, I really hope I don't trip right now, because my headlamp isn't the best. And it was a little sketchy doing what I was doing, but I wanted to warm up. And so I was trying to go fast. And eventually I did warm up, and that section took a little bit longer than I wanted it to. I think it took me close to an hour to get to you guys. So I think I rolled in like 8:30 or something.
Yeah.
PM.
It was 8:34 probably.
Yeah, so which was great. So that put me at a pace where I was pretty confident that, Courtney and Jimmy could easily do what they needed to do to get me to the finish, which was kind of a weight off my shoulders, really, because that was one of the big worries I had was, could I go fast enough to allow for them to, hike/run what they're comfortable doing? Because going into this, I know their strengths and weaknesses, and I didn't want to put them in a position where they were going to have to, PR like 30 miles or 15 miles just to pace me so that I could actually finish in time. So it worked out, basically. I'm really glad that I didn't have to put you guys in that position. And I don't know if I would have. I might have just dropped if that would have been the case.
Well, and it was really great, too, because he told us at the first aid station that it was probably going to take him about 8 to 10 hours. And he was just, he wasn't completely sure, but just to get to mile 55.
Yeah, which would have put me at like 14 hours or 15 hours. And the cutoff, I think, there was 16 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so we were kind of banking on him coming in at, roughly like probably 9 at the earliest, and then, somewhere around there. And so we went and got food in the timing that he was running. And it's about an hour drive out. So we went and got food, and we drove back to the aid station. And this was at mile 55. And at this spot, there's also little to no parking. You have to park on the side of the street and walk about maybe a little over half a mile to the aid station. So you're carrying all the gear back to the aid station. And so Jimmy and I both were going to pace him, so we needed to go grab our bibs. So when we went to get our bibs to pace, we were just, talking to a couple guys, trying to see where people were at on the trails. And one of the guys said, okay, yeah, from this aid station, it's only 3 hours back. And we're thinking, that's not right. Like, that can't be right. Because at this point, I think it was probably 7:50. And so what he was saying would mean that David would be coming in at 8 o'clock. And so we were like, well, crap, we don't have anything ready. We're like, everything's in the truck. We would still have to grab all the stuff and bring it back to this aid station before he gets here. And we have 10 minutes. So we got a little worried and ran back to the truck, grabbed everything we could, probably forgot quite a bit of things, and then ran it all back to the aid station. And we weren't sure if he was going to want top ramen, hot chocolate, something warm. So we tried to grab everything we could. And he ended up coming in at 8:34. So it was really close for us just because we weren't sure. And so luckily we talked to that guy because we wouldn't have been ready if we hadn't. So that was really stressful and great for him to come in so early. Like, we were super excited to see him. It was just a shocker because we weren't banking on him coming in until 9 because he kind of told us, I'm going to be here in 8 to 10 hours. And so we just assumed, okay, plan for an hour before that, which was 9 o'clock. So
yeah, and that's probably one of the downfalls of packing everything in those tubs is portability is not really something that comes with that.
But we had 4 people, so I mean, we were able to do it. Had we only had like 1 or 2 people, it would have been a lot harder. But I mean, there was 4 of us at the time, so we were able to carry all of it.
Yeah. So I came in, and again, you guys had a primo spot there. It was right next to where you come in at. And so I came in, and this time I took some time. So we spent over a half an hour.
Yeah, 30 minutes or so.
Yeah, it was close to 40 minutes before Jimmy and I actually went out of there.
And we actually had to go to the truck a couple of times. He needed a new pair of shorts and then also
gloves.
Gloves, yes.
Well, it was boxers.
Oh, boxers, that's right.
So, and my leggings. So yeah, I was cold.
He was shivering really bad, yes.
Soaking wet. So when I got in there, within like a minute or two of not moving, I was shivering bad. And so I was like, I have to change now. Like, I got to get out of these wet clothes, which I did. And I had brought like cold weather stuff, which is what I put on. So I had a long sleeve base layer, and then I had a light jacket, like just a kind of a super lightweight jacket. And then I had a thick Gore-Tex North Face, like 100% waterproof jacket. That's like a trash bag, except thick. And so I put on all that, and I had long leggings on and everything.
And then he also switched to a beanie instead of a...
Yeah, and I switched to a beanie instead of a hat. And so I was layered up, and I felt pretty good. By the end of it, and that's what pushed us out, was I was starting to shiver again, and we were like, we got to just get going. But it was good. That was a really fun time. We made him some
hot chocolate too during that time.
Yeah, they made me hot chocolate, and I just sat. We talked a bit. I got to hear some of their stories about the day and how hectic it's been to drive around and stuff, and that they got to go eat it back in town, which was cool.
He also had some oranges too.
Oh yeah, Ben was force feeding me oranges, which was great. He was peeling them very well, so that was awesome. And it was a good time. I mean, I loved sitting there. It's too bad I couldn't have sat longer. But just like that, Jimmy and I were out of there. And Jimmy seemed pumped, ready to roll.
He was layered up. Big about it all day, saying he was going to go fast. He wasn't worried.
Well, yeah, he was layered up good too. And within like a half mile, I think he had to take off some of it because he was sweating.
Jimmy had, I think, 4 coats on.
Yeah, so. He was layered up, and he was wearing hiking pants. Yeah, the first section, which was 6 miles, I actually did not feel good on. I was feeling really bad, really. And my headlamp, actually, that was one of the biggest, mess ups of the whole night, was my headlamp. A couple times, and this was the first time of that. So I didn't swap it even though I had already been using it for over an hour.
Well, and we should have been on that. I don't think we thought to...
Yeah. The headlamp itself that I was using, which this was a mistake, I actually have like a $100 plus Petzl headlamp, the Reactic Plus, and a spare battery for it. And that thing will last all night, especially with the spare battery. And instead, I opted to use this little Nightcore Mini, which was like a $20 headlamp, pretty much disposable almost.
To be fair, though, we had trained with it. We had trained with it for quite a bit, and it had lasted.
Yeah, I used it at the Angry Owl overnight, and it worked fine the whole time. And this time, maybe it was just the weather or something, but it only lasted like 3 hours total. So pretty quickly with Jimmy, my headlamp died, and I didn't bring a spare for some reason, which was another oversight. Even though, I packed like 7 or 8 headlamps. And so, oh baby, what do you want? So my headlamp dies, and I'm pretty much having to use Jimmy's light. So I'm just tailing close behind him. And I can't really see all that well, so we're moving pretty slow. And then we come up to the aid station at mile 61, which is hosted by the Y-East Wolfpack. And it's got your boy, Yassine Daboon, out there. And they had a bunch of energy. It was super awesome. And Yassine got me mashed potatoes, which brought me back to life. Like on that stretch, I was feeling so crummy and cold. And they got me mashed potatoes, a bunch of Coke. So I was sitting there feeling great, really, after that. And wouldn't you know it, Marla was there, and she had a spare handheld light. And she's like, yeah, if you need it, you can have it. And I swear to God, like that aid station alone just totally turned the race. Like between getting that light and those mashed potatoes, it was just awesome. So after that, Jimmy and I were charged up. And I think if you look at the Strava data, that next section, we're going like sub 15 minutes per mile, almost every mile until that next aid station. So we pretty much flew for us that next bit. And the last aid station, which was Timothy Lake Dam, was super cool. I wish everyone could see it because it was so awesome. Like you're coming up towards the dam and everything is lit up like Christmas lights. So you're walking on the dam and the whole dam is covered in lights. And then it just leads all the way up to the aid station. And so it's super pretty, and it's just kind of surreal, like you're running across this dam that's just like lit up with Christmas lights or whatever. And the guys there I think they were all wearing Halloween costumes, and they were super nice. I think I had chicken broth for the first time there. And I took a little bit longer than I probably should have at that aid station, but it was good. Still had some Coke and everything. And that was the last one. Jimmy and I were out of there, and we cruised. And especially the last 3 miles, I ran pretty hard, probably harder than Jimmy was accustomed to going. But I picked up the pace those last 3 miles, but he kept up. He was sweating really hard because he was layered up still. He had like all of his jackets on. So by the time we got into that aid station, he was just covered in sweat.
Well, it was really funny because when they got into the aid station, we should have been focused on David, but all of us were like, holy cow, Jimmy, are you okay? Because Jimmy just looked rough. Like he was sweating really bad. His face was so red. I was like asking if he wanted rubs. Like was asking like what I could do for him because he looked really bad. And David looked great.
Well, yeah. I mean, he was wearing like 10 pounds of coats. So we got in there. This is mile 70 now. We're back at Clackamas. And this is where I pick up Courtney to pace me. And what I tell Jimmy coming down before we get there, I was like, look, I'm not going to sit with the guys. Like, we don't have time. Because I was starting to get worried about my pace and my body. Because I was starting to feel something in the back of my knee. And running was getting a little bit harder overall. Just like my whole body was starting to hurt. And so I was like, I had a feeling that running was going to not be an option soon. And so I was like, well, I want to bank time. Like, I don't want to waste time sitting here and just freezing up more. And so I told Jimmy, I'm like, look, I'm just going to go to the actual aid station. I'm not going to sit with the guys. They can come over and talk to me, but I need to just get hot food and then we get out of here with Courtney. And so that's what we did. I mean, I ran in and I grabbed a couple things that I wanted from my buddies, but then I just headed right back over to the actual aid station and I sat in a chair, got some Coke, and I had more pierogi, which was great, and some mashed potatoes there too. And so, and really after the first time that I had seen you guys at Clackamas at 55, I was done with Tailwind. I told myself, I'm like, it's aid station food from here on out. And so that's what I did. I mean, I pretty much only ate aid station food and drank water that I had with me. And thank God the aid stations were stocked awesomely. I mean, the aid stations throughout the entire day were bar none the best I've ever seen. I mean, and we've been racing for a long time, albeit not too many 100-milers, although we've partook in events where 100-milers are going on. So we're sharing those aid stations. And none have compared to these. These were so awesome.
I mean, it wasn't just the food. Like, every single person that was working at any of those aid stations, at least for the part I was running with him, they were amazing. Like, I didn't feel low at all. And even just coming into those aid stations, like, I felt empowered. So,
yeah, I mean, throughout the whole night, I mean, these guys are out there just as long as I am, if not longer. And they are holding down the forts. I didn't have one bad experience.
The whole time, yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. So if there was one thing I was going to, compliment the race for, it would definitely be the people that they get to volunteer at those aid stations and work at them are just awesome. They really make the race what it is.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, they helped me finish. I doubt I would have finished if, I wouldn't have met those guys at mile 61. So kudos to Go Beyond Racing for getting all those people. So I'm in my chair over at Clackamas in the aid station, eating my hot food, getting ready to leave with Courtney, and we're ready to go.
Yeah.
We take off. So the next section is it's not easy. It's net uphill because it's that 30 mile. It's the same 30 miles on the PCT that, we had done earlier in the day. Because like I mentioned, this particular part is a big lollipop. So you're doing 30 miles out on the PCT, a loop around Timothy Lake, and then the 30 miles back. And so this 30 miles back is what Courtney's pacing me on. And this section is 29.4 miles with 4,000 feet of gain and only 2,500 feet of loss. So luckily we had a lot of time.
Yeah. We
had well over 12 hours to do 30 miles, which, seemed entirely possible to do at the time. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I thought, we just got to grind this out. So we leave that aid station, and again, I make the critical mistake of not getting a good headlamp. I don't know why I didn't actually pick up my Petzl. I'm sure part of it was that I didn't actually hang out with you guys where you had all the stuff at. I was just over in the other aid station, but that was a big mistake.
Well, and like I said, we didn't offer it to him either. We should have had all of those set up. I mean, we just gave him the smaller headlamps that were what he was using before, but we didn't offer him any of the... He had like 8 headlamps. We just gave him the small headlamps that...
Yeah, so they gave me the shitty headlamp. And
we did.
It died within an hour, maybe something like that or less. And then Courtney said she had a spare headlamp, which was really Jimmy's. Just Jimmy's that he had used all night. So it was dead as well. So that was probably the biggest fuck up of the whole thing was the headlamps. So we were really slow going on that next section when my headlamp died. And I kind of don't remember a lot of this because I was starting to feel the effects of the day and the sleep deprivation. So this next 30-mile section is what I remember the least. A lot of what I remember just like my leg hurting really bad. So the back of my knee just throughout the day had just gotten progressively worse and worse. And especially when I would stop at aid stations, which I was also doing more and more of, when I would get up, it just felt like my knee wasn't supposed to bend, which I didn't. But as I ran, it kind of loosened up a little bit. So I was like, whatever, I'm just getting stiff. And my back was super bad. So I hadn't talked about it yet, but throughout the whole day, I was experiencing some chafing on my lower back, right where the bottom of my vest sits. And I think it was partially because I was holding a soft flask back there that was filled with water and tailwind. And so that was just like, I think when I was running, it was just causing the vest to rub on me a lot back there.
He was also really wet, though. In the beginning, the first 26 miles, he was soaking wet. So I would imagine a lot of it had to do with your shirt being so wet and the friction off your vest.
Yeah, I mean, I was wet the whole time.
Yeah.
So anyways, the chafing was really getting to me at that point. I mean, it hurt really bad. The worst chafing I've ever had in my life.
It was so bad, and I felt really bad. I was going to offer to carry his vest, but I didn't because I just wasn't sure if I could carry it, and I didn't want to say, here, take it back.
Yeah, and to be clear, muling is permitted, which means, your crew or your pacer can carry stuff for you. So it wasn't that she wasn't sure about that. It was that she just wasn't sure if she could physically carry it for 30 miles.
I mean, yes, that was also true.
Which, whatever. I mean, you're going to suffer to get these done unless you're Superman. So I kind of accepted that. And I was ready to live with it for another couple hours. But that didn't take away from the fact that it hurt. And it was just like, you start to move slower and slower. So, I mean, our pace really wasn't too bad. I think we did the whole section, 30 miles, half of it in the dark. Took us a little over 9 hours, which for you is very fast.
It was a PR for me.
So that was good. Definitely not a PR for me, but we still moved a lot faster than I thought we would. So, we finished, well, I won't jump to the finish yet, but the big turning point for me was when the sun came up. So a lot of the night when we were using mostly Courtney's headlamp, I don't remember. I just remember kind of like zombie mode, walking okay, there is light. I'm following light.
Well, I would feel bad because I would try to think of things to talk about, but he was so zombie, he didn't really want, or he didn't really know what to talk about or even really know what was going on most of the time. So I was kind of just talking and then...
Yeah, I wasn't about to hold a conversation, really. And certainly not carry a conversation. So, yeah, there was a lot of just not talking and walking.
Yeah.
And I did eventually listen to my book, which I remember none of now. So I have to go back and listen to 4 chapters again. But it was tough. That dark section, once my headlamp went out, was tough. It was like that first 10-mile stretch was just like, man,
It was also really bad because I actually hadn't slept either. So we both had woken up at 5:30 the morning before, and then so that probably wasn't the smartest idea on my part. I tried to sleep quite a bit, but I just was so nervous for him that it was really hard for me to try to sleep. Yeah.
So this was probably from 3 a.m. until 6:30 or so when the sun kind of came up.
Yeah.
So that 3 hours or so was just brutal. But the sun did rise, and it was a beautiful sunrise.
It really was really pretty.
Got a beautiful picture. And so it did kind of turn around a little bit. We ran for a good hour probably throughout the next couple hours.
Yeah.
Once the sun did come up and we could see some stuff. There was a lot of climbing though. I mean, it seemed like most of it was uphill, probably because it was. And it was rough. I mean, there was some times where it was just like, oh man, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to keep walking. This is just taking forever. And so, I mean, I really don't remember too much aside from there's definitely hallucinations that occurred. Nothing really too major. There's definitely some times where I thought I saw people where they weren't there.
It was actually weird because I was hallucinating too. I kept thinking I saw the tents that were the aid stations because on the trees there was a lot of white. So I kept thinking, oh yeah, we're really close to an aid station. I mean, I never said it, but in my head I was like, oh, there's one right there. And then we would come up on the hill and it would just be a tree. And I'm like, oh, never mind. It's not an aid station. And that happened to me probably like 10 times.
Yeah. The same thing happened to me after mile 96 aid station. So that was another big kind of thing that I do remember is getting to that aid station at mile 96. So, you're only 4 miles away from the finish, less than 4 miles really. And you come into that aid station, and those guys were super nice. I mean, especially the main guy.
That was one of the nicest guys I've ever met. The way he talked to David, it was like they'd been friends for years.
Yeah, it was great. He was super cool dude. Got me mashed potatoes, got me Coke. And he was pretty firm about getting us out of there.
Yeah,
he's like,
he was good.
What's the time you guys want to be out of here? And I think I was like, no more than 10 minutes, like less than 10 minutes.
I don't even think he gave you an option. I think he came in and said, in 10 minutes, you guys are out of here.
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he said, in 10 minutes, you guys are out of here.
So we took the time, we sat down, although I will say I wish we wouldn't have sat in that tent.
It was heated again.
Yeah, it felt so good to be in that room. It was so warm and nice. And I had my hot mashed potatoes and cold Coca-Cola. And everything was right in the world. Just chilling in that tent with the propane heaters blasting on me. And this was the first time I felt my knee. So when I was sitting in that chair, I felt the back of my knee. And it felt like the front of my knee. It was just so swollen and protruding out. I was like, oh shit, like something is wrong with me. Like that's not supposed to happen. But I was like, well, whatever. I can march on for the last 4 miles. I guess it doesn't really matter. And so that guy got us out. Thank God. And we trudged on, and it was a slow going 4 miles. And when you think 4 miles, at least for me, when I hear that initially, I'm like, oh, dude, I can do that in a half an hour pretty easily. Like, whatever. Maybe 40 minutes tops if it's like bad terrain. And then you realize your body, for me at the time, was just like in a state where this 4 miles could take 2 hours, like easily. And
I mean, it felt that way for me too, though. I don't know why, but it was just, I think the last 4 miles were the hardest for me, for just the 30 miles.
Well, they were definitely all uphill. That was part of it. So that was a little annoying. But, I mean, I don't know if it would have mattered. I couldn't run anymore. Like, after that, my leg hurt so bad that even walking was hurting. I pretty much just had to keep my legs straight and just, like, swing my hip. But we just death marched on those last 4 miles, and we were with some other guys that were also death marching. And they kept asking if we wanted to pass, and we're just like, no, I'm not moving at any speed other than what I'm doing right now. And so it took forever. It felt like forever, I'll tell you that. And this was the point where I was hallucinating pretty badly. Like, I kept thinking I saw cars, and I was like, fuck yeah, dude, that's the finish. Like, I see the cars. And then it's like a big stump. And I'm like, what the heck? Dang it. And I almost cried once. Aww. Because I was so positive. Because, I had ran this section earlier, well, the day before now, going the opposite way. And I thought I had remembered this turn that led to the parking lot. And so when I saw it, I'm like, oh, yes, this is it. Like, this is it. And, my watch at the time, I knew was unreliable because it had been going all over. And so I really didn't know where I was at. And I saw that turn and I was like, thank God it's over. Like, I did it. And then we come around, and rather it's like you come around the corner and it's just an uphill. I was just like, oh no, God, I don't want to go up that hill. And we went up the hill, and actually it was probably like a half mile more, I think, after that, before the finish. And in that time, I saw a dozen more cars, I swear, just parked in the forest. But eventually, I think the first thing that I heard was like people cheering. And I was like, oh God, please tell me that's real people like cheering and not some idiot runner, like just yelling. And then I saw cars and the road. And I was like, God, tell me that's real. And we walked out over and onto the road. And then I saw like everything. I was just like, oh, thank God it's over. Like, not to say that I wanted the, like, you know, that I was so sick of everything. It was just like, you know, it was this crazy moment where I had spent so much time, you know, at this point, 26 hours and 50 minutes or whatever, running and hiking and walking and, you know, sitting and struggling. And so to see the end right in front of me, part of it is like you're on this crazy journey that you don't know where it's taking you. And when the end is just sitting right in front of you, it's a little sad because you kind of don't want it to be over. And especially when you get to do it with someone like you. And, you know, I have all my friends out there and everything that are all working towards the same goal of having me do this one singular thing. It's kind of sad to see it end. But at the same time, you're suffering so much. And, you know, like my legs hurt so bad. And there's just such an array of emotions that it's hard to describe until you do it. But it's definitely one of the best feelings in the world to cross that finish line and just know you gave it your all, like you did everything you could and it worked out and you had friends and family there to see you through. And it was great. I mean, it was exactly what I had hoped for. And when we crossed that finish line, I think we got some pictures or something. I don't really remember.
Yeah, we did.
And I just remember I could barely stand because my leg hurt so bad. And, you know, my friends came over and were congratulating me and stuff. And I was just like, I need a chair. Like, I can't stand up. My fucking leg. And they brought me a chair.
Yeah, we were sitting in the chair for a while in the cold after he had finished. And there was just a really nice lady. I don't think she even worked there. I think she was just helping her husband. And she was like, you guys are silly. What are you doing sitting out here in the cold?
Yeah, because we're shivering now. Like,
and she's like, you know, there's a warm room right here. I mean, we were sitting right across from this warm room. And she goes, yeah, just enter this tent. And there's a bunch of cots in there that you can lay on. You know, it's just this really nice warm room. And David's like, what? And so, yeah, we got up and entered the room. And sure enough, yeah, it was just this really nice area with a bunch of cots and chairs. And
yeah. And so, yeah, I hobbled in there and laid on a cot. And my buddy Ben brought me a Mountain Dew. And I just laid on that cot for a bit, holding the buckle, which, beautiful buckle. So I was very happy with that. And I just laid on that cot and drank the Mountain Dew and just like felt my leg throbbing and just kind of reflected on the day and just how crazy everything was and how weird it was that I actually got to the finish through everything that had happened in the past, month. Especially reflecting back on like my failure at Squamish, which for me it was rough because I had never done that before. I'd never quit something like that. So that kind of weighed on my mind going into this. You just don't know if it's a slippery slope. Like once you quit one thing, are you going to quit everything? And luckily, I think it was the contrary. Like I think quitting at Squamish actually helped me finish this race just because it made me appreciate things a bit more. Like it's easy to forget that we're doing something that so few people can do, not only physically, but I think almost anyone could do this physically.
Yeah.
It's more just like the time and effort and money to put into this, to be able to do it, and to have like the friends and people around you to do it. It just takes so much.
Well, and the mental is a huge part.
Yeah, and you have to want to do it, but we're so lucky to be able to have all those things come together and to be able to go out there and do this thing. And so sometimes it's easy to forget that. And when you're out there feeling sorry for yourself, like I was at Squamish, it makes it hard sometimes. And so when I was out there, anytime I did feel bad for myself or anything at Mountain Lakes, it was easy to reflect back and be like, just a couple weeks ago, I was so injured I couldn't run. Like, I'm so thankful that my legs work right now enough to be able to take me the next 20 miles or 30 miles or whatever. So I think, that played a big role in the whole day. And I've had lower times in different runs. Like throughout this whole 100 miles, I really didn't have a super low point. There was definitely lows, but there was never a time where I thought about quitting. The only time it even crossed my mind was just like, safety reasons, like if my ankle gets bad or if I actually get hypothermia, things like that. But there's never like, I don't want to be here anymore. Like I'm done. I just want to quit. It got close for sure in those last like 30 miles. There were some times where I didn't want to be doing that, but the goal was always outweighed all that. So it worked out, and we finished, and we sat in that hot room for 10, 20 minutes maybe. I don't quite remember.
It was a while, actually. It might have been a little more, probably like about a half an hour.
Yeah, but it was good. I mean, the way home, I don't remember much.
He was out of it.
I was definitely out of it. Jimmy drove us home.
Which was really nice of Jimmy. Thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah, we made some stops on the way that...
Subway, which was so good. That was the best Subway sandwich I'd ever had.
Yeah, I had to pee a couple different times, and it hurt so bad to walk to go pee. Luckily, the actual peeing wasn't painful. My kidneys appear to be fine. But walking to the bathrooms
we stopped at a rest area, too, and it was awful because it was just a big hill. And I felt so bad for him because he tried to, hobble up the hill, and everybody's just staring. And and I mean, I was walking pretty rough too, but his poor knee. Yeah.
Well, and crazily enough, I only went to the bathroom twice during the whole race. So almost, 26 hours, almost 27 hours, and I peed twice. And that's it.
Wow.
So that was kind of crazy because I peed more during a 50K than that. And my urine, I mean, kind of gross, but just saying, my urine really wasn't even that dark. I'm sure the temperature played a role in that, and I was good about hydrating and nutrition, so.
Yeah.
But man, after the race, I had to pee a bunch.
You did. I think we stopped like 3 times.
Yeah, I peed 3 times on the way home, which was a struggle. It hurt so bad to walk around. But it all worked out, and we did eventually get home. I remember almost nothing of Sunday. I think we ordered a pizza and some wings.
Yeah.
And I think we ate them.
We got home somewhere probably around 6:15 or so, and as soon as we got home, the first thing he did was go on Uber Eats, and we ordered a pizza from The Rock, and it said it'd be delivered at 7:05. And I remember thinking, that's I'm going to fall asleep. Like, I can't stay up for that because we both still hadn't slept. And as soon as the pizza got there, I think we both had a slice, and we just put everything in the fridge and went right to bed. So,
yeah, that was rough. But and so, I mean, if you watch this show at all, you probably already know it. But we live in Olympia, Washington, so the drive between the two was like 4.5 hours or something like that.
Yeah, it was rough.
So yeah, it took a long time, but Jimmy was a trooper, and he got us there safely, so that was good. And I mean, I was rough the next couple of days. I'm still a little, so this is a week out now, and I'm still kind of rough. My leg is still kind of hurting. I haven't ran yet, but hopefully sometime next week I'll get a couple miles in. I don't think there's any permanent damage, luckily. And so, yeah, overall, I mean, in terms of gear and things like that I would change.
Headlamps?
Headlamp was a big thing. And not even, I mean, just using the right headlamp. I already paid the damn money for the high quality headlamp that would last through the night at 300 lumens. And I was too stupid to bring it. So, yeah, use the right headlamp. And
your shoes were good.
I use the Ultra Temps, which I have a love-hate relationship with. I mean, I love the way they fit and feel, but they have some durability issues for sure. But yeah, I used a brand new pair. I had only worn them once before. I put 8 miles on them. And then I used them the whole 100 miles.
Yeah. And
they worked awesome. I have one small blister on my big toe, and that was it. And I used Injinji socks, knee-high Injinji compression socks. They worked awesome. Like I said, one blister throughout both my
miles.
feet. Yeah, for 100 miles. My toes are a little numb, but that happens to me apparently on longer runs. Uh, my Salomon vests. I love Salomon vests. They were awesome. They did great. My rain jackets were awesome as well. I have an Outdoor Research one, the Helium 2. That served me very well. And those are the big things. I used some Black Diamond trekking poles for the entire thing.
Oh, yeah, those were a lifesaver.
Yeah, which I didn't plan on doing initially because, the course is relatively flat overall. I mean, it's got, over 10,000 feet of climbing, but there's only a couple sections where you probably really need them. And I was going to bring them for the first section and maybe the last section, but I ended up just keeping them the entire time, and that was good. I liked it. That was a good choice by me.
So would you recommend this race to others?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect 100-miler for your first one. Now, it is a lottery now. Apparently, after this year, they're turning it into a lottery, so good luck, everyone, for getting in. But, yeah, I would definitely recommend it. It's so beautiful when it's not, cloudy and rainy, and the sun actually comes out. It is...
I was going to say, I didn't see very much of it, but...
Yeah, it's such a beautiful area. I mean, it's gorgeous. So, yeah, it's too bad they can't hold it a month or two earlier.
Yeah.
I think it would probably be a little bit better, but I'm sure they have their reasons, and there's probably permitting issues and things like that. But yeah, it's 100% recommend it. Go Beyond Racing does an excellent job, marking the course and everything. There was never a time where I thought I was off course or anything like that. And I already mentioned the volunteers at the aid stations and stuff. The aid stations are just bar none the best.
Yeah.
The people are nice. The food at the aid stations are amazing. It's great. I mean, I have not done a better event. I mean, these guys give Candace a run for her money in terms of like how well they organize stuff. So I'm really impressed. What else? Is that it?
How do you feel today?
So yeah, I'm a week out exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, at the time of filming this,
we're still running.
Yeah, we would be finishing in an hour.
Yeah.
My leg still hurts for sure. My right leg. The chafing is all healed up. That was horrible. It was like oozing by the end when I finished, because nobody knew how bad it was until I finished and showed Courtney.
Well, and I mean, I'm one that chafes all the time, and nothing I've ever, that was the worst chafing I've ever seen in my life. It was brown and just oozing,
yeah, it hurt so bad. It was so damn painful.
His skin was, swollen, just sticking out of his back, it had to have been at least an inch off his back. It was so bad.
Oh, that's an exaggeration.
It was terrible.
Yeah, it hurt for sure. That was wretched.
Yeah, it was really
truly
wretched.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else?
What was your favorite piece of gear?
I mean, to be honest, I don't want to even give them the PR, but I think the Ultra Temps, they just...
Yeah.
I mean, to have your feet, it's...
Were they dry? Were your feet dry?
Well, those shoes drain really fast, and they dry really fast. And so my feet were wet throughout the day, but they would dry so quickly. So that combination of the Ultra Temps with the Injinji toe socks, those compression ones, it's just such a perfect combo for me. And so, I think anyone who's running, if you were to tell them, if you do this, you won't get blisters and your feet will be fine for 100 miles, I think they would take that over almost anything. So
yeah,
I'd have to give it to that combo of the shoes and socks that I wore. Although, like I said, Ultra, fix your damn durability issues, because you guys could make some good stuff. So hopefully the North Face taking over will do something about that. I don't know. But regardless, I love those Temps. They were great.
Yeah. I don't know. Can't think of anything else.
Well, then we can wrap it up. I mean...
It was a really good weekend. One of the best weekends I'll never forget.
Yeah, I couldn't have asked for it to have gone pretty much any better. I mean, I loved it. I'm super thankful for my friends and you for coming out. And you guys did an awesome job, both you and Jimmy, for your pacing duties. You excelled at what I thought was possible for you guys. And then Ben and Rodeo, just 100% positive. Every time I saw
Rodeo was
him,
positive the whole time. That's hard for Rodeo.
They were awesome. I mean, it couldn't have made for a better day for me. So, I mean, you guys all did such a great job.
You did a great job.
Well, I had the easy part of just running, so it's easy to just do one thing all day and not have to worry about somebody. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, I guess what's next? We really don't have anything on the calendar.
I may do a run in Leavenworth, just a 10-miler, nothing crazy.
They have their Brewfest run or whatever it is, Oktoberfest run.
I haven't fully committed, but...
Yeah, there's a 5 and a 10 mile, so I might do that too. We'll see. If we go out there, I'll probably do it if I can. Leavenworth is awesome for those that don't know. So that's probably the next big race. I don't really have anything. I'm not signed up for anything. I know that. I would like to do, we'll have to see if it actually opens up this year, but the Gorge Waterfalls, that would be one that's definitely on my bucket list that I would like to do. But that's a ways out. I'm sure we'll probably do a couple races before the year's over.
Last question. Are you going to do a 200 next year?
It's a thought. Yeah, it's a real thought. If I were, it'd probably be Tahoe 200. So I'm thinking about it. We'll see. I mean, I'm still not quite wanting to run that far again, but a 200 mile.
A week out.
Yeah, 200 mile is definitely a different beast than 100 mile. It's just a totally different kind of race, especially the way Candace has it structured, where you can essentially power hike the whole thing, which does intrigue me because I'm not a fastman. I'm more of a slowman. So I am interested in that, but it is a time commitment too. You got to take some days off for sure. Oh, that's another thing I would do is I would actually take days off of work after running 100 miles because I couldn't move Monday. And then, the following couple days I did work and it was a struggle. I had to have Jimmy come pick me up and everything. So that's pretty much it. I mean, we did it.
Yeah, you did it.
We did it. The big A race for the year, the whole year leading up to this was all about this race. And so, it's just satisfying to actually achieve something like this. And I'm glad I had the support of my friends and family to do it.
Yeah.
So
I've never been more proud of you. That was incredible. I don't think it makes me want to do a 100-miler though.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
We'll catch you next time.
Bye.